So this is how it started. It started with one thought. I want to draw Tom and Red throwing hands. That's basically it. But there was something else too. In Animal Crossing, there aren't a lot of conflicts. Small arguments between villagers are as bad as it gets, and those can be settled fairly quickly. And I noticed that with their strong rivalry and their implied history together, there really isn't any real canon conflict between the two. Like, none face to face. Like, obviously they're really salty about each other. But, like, it's never, like, face to face. And I kind of wanted to have their issues addressed. It didn't have to be in a civil manner, I just wanted them to actually address their feelings. Like in New Horizons, Red sells fireworks and prizes right outside of the resident services building. And Tom doesn't get upset or shoo him away. He just either isn't aware or he ignores it. Because, like, it's a kid's game, an Animal Crossing game at that. They're not going to show two iconic characters fighting. I get it. But I'm an adult and I want to fight! Which is weird, because I prefer slice-of-life nonsense over complicated, angsty plots. But I guess everyone wonders what it'd be like if a specific genre of media were to throw in something unexpected. There's tons of jokes about Animal Crossing being dark and mature, so I just wanted to try my hand at it in an addresses their issues kind of way. Does that make sense? This whole Tom and Red throw hands on the island isn't my original idea, obviously. I just wanted to contribute my own interpretation to the mix. Animal Crossing isn't going to let those two meet, because they know they'd be too mean with each other, so I decided to do it for them. But seriously, think about it. Most of what Red does in the games is a bit of a distance away from Tom, but just close enough to steal his customers, usually. So Red and Tom keep their distance while trying to make their own money and become successful, but then Tom buys an island. After all those years of having to compete with Red, he can finally focus on his own success. I'm going on the time between, like, New Leaf and New Horizons. In Pocket Camp, I think Red is only available as, like, a special item thing, and I don't even think Tom is in it. Maybe he's a special item too, but for the most part, they don't speak to each other for years, and Red stops showing up. Tom starts to relax a bit. And then, years later, this man has the gall to show up to his island and sell his stuff to their island representative. The person who's been building the island from the ground up since they got there. He practically just crapped all over Tom's hopes and dreams. That is a whole nother level of petty. And Tom is understandably livid, but we'll get to their relationship later. Let's get to the actual process of making the comic. Let's start with the script. So I started the script in the notes on my phone. It started out pretty rough. I had a lot of little jokes and interactions that didn't make it in. At first, Peeps was going to find out about Tom and Red fighting through a squirrel villager. I think it was Sally. And Tom and Red's arguments before and after the fight were dragging on a little too much. It started feeling like a long-winded diss track or something, so I asked my brother to help me shorten it. He helped me simplify and improve Tom and Red's dispute, and was the genius behind Tom's rent stew line. That was all him. He always ends up giving me ideas for the best lines in my stuff. Like, why are all his lines that make it in my scripts funnier than mine? God. I then cut up the script into sections, making a script for each character that I could give to each voice actor. I didn't do this till after finishing the comic, though. And as for drawing, I used Fire Alpaca to draw the comic. I don't really use any comic templates or anything, I just start sketching out panels and pick what looks the most interesting. But sometimes it's not about making the panels interesting, sometimes you just need to get your ideas down. Not all my pages are super eye-catching. I saved those for more important moments in the story. So basically, I roughly sketch out the comic, then draw the line art over it in a new layer, then color it, then shade. The last step is usually drawing and coloring the background. I tend to make the character and backgrounds separate. I guess next we can talk about references I used. I had to get a design down for the island rep, Peeps, so I dressed up my player in the game in a simple but cute outfit and tried to draw her in my style. I wanted to capture some of the Animal Crossing style while making sure it still feels like my art. I kind of eyeballed it with Red and Isabelle and Blathers in the comic, but I did try some concept art of Red. At first, he just kind of looked like his Animal Crossing self, but I started editing it as I went, and now he looks a bit more unique than his first design. As for the backgrounds, I used pictures from my own island for reference. I went around and took as many angles as I could of different parts of my island. Sometimes I just look online for the interior of buildings if I didn't have those pictures on me. But my island has changed a lot since then. I spent some time messing with lighting to try and get the realistic style of lighting and shading in that New Horizons game. Like, the lighting is so good in that game. It's, like, surprisingly realistic. Like, they somehow mixed realism with cartoon, and it works really well. I wanted it to feel like time was passing in the comic, so I studied how the colors change in the game's world as the sun starts to set. This comic was a great opportunity to practice lighting and drawing characters in different environments. I'm not the best at backgrounds, so I learned a lot from this. You can probably tell, but the scenes I drew of Tom and Isabel's office were hard to draw. I had to draw it in a variety of angles since there were only really 1 or 2 angles of the office. I had to look up how to draw a room in perspective for those scenes. Basically, just draw a cube, cover it in a grid, and go from there. Block down the furniture and then add detail and clean it up. That's how I did it. I'm very proud of the lighting at the end of the comic. It looks as good as I wanted it to. And then there's voice actors. Dave, Professor Rad, Hawk, and Luna. I cannot thank them enough. They did an outstanding job. I met them in a Discord server. That was my first time ever working with voice actors, and it was, well, not my first time. I've worked with them before, but I never actually directed it before. They would see my video and then ask to voice act it, and then they would put it on their channel, like how that usually goes. But this time I actually went out of my way to find voice actors, direct it, tell them what I wanted, and then they would do it for me. And then I make the video. And that's a really good opportunity for me, because I'm probably going to have to do that more in the future if I make more stuff. So this was a really good first attempt, really. I'm proud of it. I was a bit picky with Isabel, and the actress before her had a lot going on, so I kept having to let them go. Trying to get an actor for Isabel was the main reason that the video was taking so long. I'd had the comic done for months before that. Just remember, when you're working with people, you can't expect everything to go how you want it to. You're going to have to compromise sometimes. I'm glad Luna was able to help me out. She did a great job. And yes, I think Dave has voiced Sans. Please stop commenting that. I don't know if Hawks has voiced Angel Dust, but maybe. Plus, the voice I asked for did kind of end up sounding like Angel Dust, but the acting was so good that I didn't care. It was good. It works for Red. As for Tom, the vision I had for his voice was to be super deep and to sound like a tired dad. I originally wanted a slight southern accent, don't know why, but I had them drop it after the first take. But yeah, that's all I've got to say about the voices. I guess we can talk about the video a bit more. You guys had some questions that you wanted to know about the video, so I'll answer those now, I guess. The first one is, how did you come up with the personalities of each character? I had a pretty good base to start with. We know Isabel is chipper and tries her best in any situation. We know Tom is pretty chill and stone-faced and ambitious. Red is greedy, petty, and charismatic with his customers. Blathers is chatty, smart, and sweet. As for the island representative, that's basically just a self-insert, but way more active and bold than I could ever be. That's what's fun about self-inserts. It's like a better you. With these bases, I just had to go deeper by adding headcanons. Isabel, in my comic at least, is chipper, but there's a limit to it. If enough BS gets in the way of her job, she'll take charge and show some aggression if she has to. I went with tired mom energy, kind but stern when needed. Tom is more literally a tired dad. He's hardworking and tries his best to leave his troubled past behind. He sees Red as someone who's trying to drag him back into what he's been trying to avoid, so he really doesn't enjoy his company anymore, obviously. Red in this comic is as petty and greedy as ever, but I didn't want to make him out to be the villain here. He's just kind of getting in the way of Tom's plans, which is more annoying than evil. Tom is very fed up with him at this point, and him coming all the way to his island was the last straw. I wanted to make Red a lot more avoidant when it comes to conflict and emotions. Like, he's willing to cause trouble, but the second things get too serious, he wants to run. He doesn't want to actually talk about it here. He just wants to get back at Tom. And he ends up biting off way more than he can chew, which is typical for him. Don't get me wrong, I love Red. He's funny, and there's definitely some kindness in him. I'm not pushing his potential aside. He doesn't have to be perfect. I don't want him to be. That's the whole point of this comic. Disputes can get messy. People take things too far when they're hurt. And if you don't try to talk about it in a calm and collected manner, it's not going to go well. The next question was, why did you make Tom choose the shovel as his weapon? Listen, just outright bringing out the axe is funny, but I wanted something more subtle for this comic. An axe doesn't really seem like Tom's style to me. You can still be threatening with a shovel, but with an axe, it just looks like, rah, I'm gonna chop you up, which is just kind of edgy and silly. The scene was supposed to transition from comedic into a more serious tone as the chase and fight goes on, and the axe is too extreme for what it was going for. An axe is funnier for a short skit, but what I was doing was much longer, so I decided on the shovel. That's all for questions. Let's move on to discussing the story. So, the main premise of the story is to analyze and portray Tom and Red's relationship and how on edge it is from the years of competition and pent-up anger. This was the breaking point for both of them. I also wanted to try my hand at portraying some of the characters in Animal Crossing, and this was a good way to do that. I literally just thought I want to do more Animal Crossing art, and I want to draw more of the characters and put them in the world and interact with them because I love the game. It's really fun. I want to do stuff with it, so that's what I did. So, we start out with Isabel, who's trying to talk sense to Tom, who's contemplating how badly he wants to disfigure Red's stupid face. Probably his words, not mine. And as Isabel said, she's never seen him this angry. This is uncharacteristic of him, at least from what she's seen. I don't really think Tom gets hostile with anyone else. He's definitely mellowed out a lot over the years. Not like I think he was hostile in the past either, but you know what I mean. Also, for those of you who assumed I was making Tom and Isabel a thing by calling him Sweetie, I made Isabel the type to call everyone Sweetie. She cares for Tom and wants the best for him, but I wouldn't say it's romantic. Sorry. I don't mind people who ship it, I just hadn't planned on it for this story. So, Tom heads out to go have a civil discussion with Red. Like, he's not gonna let this slide. Red wormed his way back into his life. He's not gonna ignore him this time. Despite the outburst in front of Isabel, he's trying to calm down and be reasonable. His goal is just to tell Red off, to get him to leave, and move on with his life. So he can't be acting friendly to do that. He has to put his foot down. And then, as Red does, he reignites that primal rage in Tom, and the situation goes from bad to worse. You know when someone gets so mad they look calm? That's what that was. He snapped beyond the point of reason and is ready to throw down. But first he wants to let Red know he's screwed. Royally. It's literally his property, and it's an island. There's nowhere to run. And of course, Red does the stupidest thing and runs the opposite way of his only escape, his boat, and chooses to hide instead. And yeah, he's forced to defend himself and exchanges the first blow, a sturdy kick to the gut. He didn't really want to do it though. As you can tell, he regrets it. He could have picked up the shovel to defend himself, but he throws it away. He's still got some reason in him, while Tom is steadily losing his morals as we speak. A swift punch gets Red in the mood, though. They both decide this is the best way to let out all their pent-up aggression. A remote island is a decent place to fight, I guess. And here, you get to see how Tom and Red's feelings leak into the fight. Tom is trying to keep Red on the ground and loom over him. A power move. He wants Red to know he's screwed up coming here. Red fights dirty, just trying to make it hurt. He goes for a nasty headbutt to get himself off the ground and starts biting, too. He doesn't really want to gain the upper hand here. He's just being feral about it. Like, he's in it now. Might as well do some damage. And around the end, it starts getting pretty intense. Fur is getting ripped out. Tom sneaks in a suplex. It's crazy. Wait, I don't know if you can sneak in a suplex. And of course, Peeps finds them at the climax of the fight, and she's understandably scared. So far, the worst conflict she's seen here is a dispute over sharing snacks that could be solved by giving them a gift. She was not prepared for a fist fight. So she does the smart thing and gets Isabel. She was in Smash, she'll know what to do. She shifts into Mama Bear mode and swoops in and tells them off. She's basically like, look, I know you're mad, but I'm gonna need you to either talk it out or I'm gonna have to ban Red. Which I'm sure Tom wouldn't mind. But Tom does try to vent and get across that he just doesn't want to do this anymore. He's moved on. Red hasn't, and this conversation confirmed that he's not worth anything to Tom anymore. And it really stings. Tom is trying to push him away here, and it's working. Red is very over this whole interaction, so he leaves. But that doesn't mean he isn't in pain anymore. He's recovering much more slowly than Tom, and is barely keeping it together, so he has to leave to avoid embarrassing himself anymore. Then we get Isabel, who just wants to know what all that was about, and Peeps, who is confused but glad the fight is over. And they're both concerned about Tom, of course. Isabel asks Tom what his history is with Red, and why hearing from him again made him snap. And we learn that they used to work together, and that they disagreed on how things should be done. This led to them splitting up. I'm sure it was more complex than that, but that was all Tom was willing to share. We do get to see Tom and Red being pretty vulnerable at the end, though. But there's a distinct difference. Tom has people to vent to. Red doesn't. Red is alone and with no outlet. He just has to sit and simmer in his own negativity. Just wait it out. I'd say Tom has a healthy, reliable environment to lean back on if he messes up. Red doesn't have the luxury of this. I should also mention that in this comic, I didn't intend to make Tom and Red in a romantic relationship in the past. I know it's something people have been doing lately. And it's hilarious. I love the whole bitter exes idea. It works really well for them. I just didn't have that in mind when I got started on this. I considered it, because the idea was getting very popular, and I do think it's a nice ship, but I didn't really need them to be exes to make this fight work. Friendships are just as strong, especially with two people who originally had no one. You can be hurt by a falling out even without being in love. It can hurt just as bad, if not more. So I was more focused on their friendship than any romantic feelings. Now, let's talk about how they handled this. I didn't make this comic to place blame or pick sides. I just wanted to explore their relationship and what would happen if they were put in a position where they would address their issues. It's going to be messy at first, because the emotions are raw and heavy. They're just going to say a bunch of hurtful stuff and storm off in a huff. That's how it starts. But now that the worst of it is over with, maybe they can try again. If they get the chance to, I mean. We'll see. Tom went overboard in many ways. He lost his cool, and it was apparent. He tried to suppress it, but Red forces it out. He's good at making Tom mad. He's been doing it for years now. Red went from pure self-defense into reckless abandon, going along with the fight to blow off some steam. It was a good opportunity for him, since he never had any real outlet for his anger. So he just did whatever he felt like after the first punch. They both kept escalating the fight until someone had to intervene before someone got seriously hurt. And luckily, no one broke anything, but they're going to be sore for a while. At least Tom has access to a medkit or two. Red's just going to have to tough it out for a while. So yeah, in a fight, both sides could have handled it differently, but it is how it is. Now they have to deal with the regret and embarrassment of acting on their emotions. Especially Tom, who really cares about his appearances. Both know that was probably not their best moment, and it shows. I just wanted to get them to be able to vent this time, even if that meant punching each other in the face. Yeah, this project took months to complete, like almost a year, counting the editing it had to do to remake the comic for YouTube and getting voice actors and stuff. I learned a lot from this experience, and it's improved so many of my skills in the process. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it, because I put so much effort into this. I'm very proud of it. That's all I have to say for now. I don't have much to update you guys on, but I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. It's been a pleasure to do this, and I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys later.